The mirror behind the mahogany bar caught more than just bottles of aged whiskey and crystal glasses. In its polished surface, three men sat with calculated precision at separated tables throughout the dining room, their eyes tracking a single target through the glass partition of the private dining area. CEO Ava Sterling gestured animatedly as she discussed fourth-quarter projections with her legal team, unaware of the predatory attention focused on her every movement. Ethan Murphy methodically wiped down table 12, his trained eyes catching details that others would overlook. His daughter Lily sat across from him in the burgundy booth, her fingers moving in fluid American Sign Language as she described her school day. But Ethan's attention had shifted to the man in the tailored charcoal suit near the windows, whose lips were moving in a barely perceptible whisper. Through years of necessity communicating with his deaf daughter, Ethan had developed advanced skills at reading lips from distances and challenging angles. The ability had become natural, allowing him to understand conversations across crowded rooms and through soundproof glass. What he observed now made his blood run cold. The man's mouth was forming the words, "Back door 7 minutes." The pendant lights above the dining area flickered twice, creating shadows that danced across the white tablecloths. Ethan's gaze swept toward the kitchen, where the fire alarm sensor was blinking amber instead of its usual green. His mental inventory kicked into overdrive: the carbon dioxide fire suppression system near the stoves, the emergency exits with illuminated signs, the thick kitchen towels beside the prep stations, and the yellow wet floor signs positioned near service areas. Everything appeared ordinary to the casual observer, yet something in the timing felt deliberately wrong, like a choreographed performance designed to create vulnerabilities at exactly the right moment. The man Ethan labeled as Rook stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood with deliberate precision. Ethan watched as Rook's hand moved beneath his jacket, and though the movement lasted only seconds, Ethan caught the man's mouth, forming a countdown: masks, in 3, 2. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The countdown had begun, and Ethan understood with crystal clarity and growing dread that his beloved daughter sat directly in the potential line of fire for whatever was about to unfold in this upscale restaurant. Earlier that evening, as the sun had been setting over the city skyline, Ethan had made a heartfelt promise to Lily that tonight would be something special, just the two of them enjoying quality time together, with no work interruptions, no distractions from his demanding job, and no concerns beyond sharing a quiet meal and catching up on each other's lives. As part of that promise, he had presented her with what appeared to be a simple piece of jewelry. An elegant emergency bracelet that he had carefully programmed with advanced GPS tracking capabilities and a sophisticated silent alert system that could summon help without making any detectable sound. He had presented the device as nothing more than a thoughtful gift from a loving father, rather than revealing its true purpose as a high-tech safety precaution born from his overprotective instincts and professional background. The sleek bracelet looked like ordinary designer jewelry that any teenage girl might wear, but hidden within its polished metal casing was cutting-edge technology that could pinpoint their exact location and automatically transmit emergency signals to law enforcement agencies without requiring any verbal communication whatsoever. Through the crystal-clear glass partition that separated the main dining area from the private conference room, CEO Ava Sterling commanded attention and respect even during what appeared to be a routine business conversation. Her well-documented reputation for successfully turning around failing companies and transforming them into profitable enterprises had made her both extraordinarily wealthy and remarkably powerful in the corporate world, but Ethan understood from his own experience that such high-profile success often came with a substantial price tag that extended far beyond financial considerations. Tonight, it seemed increasingly likely that the accumulated cost of her professional achievements was about to be collected in the most dangerous and personal way imaginable. A young server with nervous energy approached their table, apologizing profusely for what she described as minor electrical issues that had been plaguing the restaurant throughout the evening. "The kitchen sensors keep acting up," she whispered conspiratorially, glancing around to make sure no other customers could overhear her complaints. "The lights in the prep area have been flashing on and off all evening like some kind of strobe effect. The management thinks it's probably just humidity from the dishwashers affecting the electrical system, but it's been making everyone jumpy." She pointed with obvious concern toward the official emergency exit diagram that was posted prominently near the kitchen entrance, its bold red arrows clearly marking multiple escape routes that led to different parts of the building and ultimately to various street exits. Ethan nodded politely and offered appropriate reassurances to the worried server, but his attention remained laser-focused on the three men who were now positioning themselves with what appeared to be practiced military precision throughout the restaurant's main dining area. The coordination between their movements was far too perfect and deliberate to be mere coincidence, and the timing of their actions suggested extensive planning and rehearsal. When Ava's expensive smartphone buzzed urgently against the polished conference table, and her facial expression shifted dramatically from confident and controlled to concerned, and slightly frightened. Ethan managed to catch a glimpse of the text message reflected clearly in the large window glass behind her chair. Guard delay confirmed 30 minutes minimum. The professional security detail that should have been present to protect someone of Ava's prominence and wealth was conspicuously absent from their usual positions, and Ethan realized, with growing certainty, that someone with inside knowledge had deliberately orchestrated this particular vulnerability with surgical precision and perfect timing. The carefully planned chaos began with what appeared to be completely manufactured clumsiness designed to create maximum distraction at the optimal moment. Nash, who had been positioned strategically near the elegant mahogany bar area, stood up abruptly from his table with theatrical awkwardness, and managed to knock over his full glass of expensive Bordeaux wine, sending the dark red liquid cascading dramatically across the pristine white tablecloth, before splashing onto the polished marble floor below. The crimson stain spread across the expensive fabric like spilled blood, creating a vivid and disturbing image that immediately captured the attention of nearby diners, who turned their heads to observe the commotion with natural human curiosity. In that precisely calculated moment of distraction, when every eye in the restaurant was focused on the wine-soaked tablecloth, Doyle moved with practiced efficiency toward the main entrance, his experienced fingers working quickly and quietly to engage what appeared to be additional security locks that would prevent easy escape. Marcel, who held the important position of the restaurant's primary security coordinator and should have been maintaining constant vigilance over the dining area, chose that exact moment to step outside for what he claimed was an urgent phone call, effectively leaving the dining room without its most important layer of professional protection. Ethan watched with growing alarm through the kitchen's stainless steel pass-through window as Rook approached the glass-walled private dining room where Ava continued her business meeting, still completely oblivious to the carefully orchestrated danger that was closing around her like the jaws of an expertly designed trap. The physical distance between Ethan's position and the unfolding drama was too great for him to hear the actual words being spoken, but his highly developed lip-reading skills allowed him to fill in the terrifying blanks with disturbing accuracy. Rook's mouth was clearly forming the tactical phrases, 2-minute sweep and back extraction, as he positioned his body to effectively block the most direct path from the private dining room to the main exit. Near the kitchen area, Ethan's security-conscious mind automatically cataloged the master key to the electrical control panel hanging on its designated hook, as well as the emergency lighting switches that could instantly plunge entire sections of the restaurant into complete darkness, creating ideal conditions for confusion and criminal activity. The professional trap was closing around its intended victims with military efficiency and precision, and Ethan realized with absolute clarity that intervention was no longer simply an option. He might consider it had become an essential necessity if lives were going to be saved. When Rook placed his hand with deceptive gentleness on Ava's shoulder and whispered something directly into her ear that made her face drain completely of color within seconds, Ethan knew beyond any doubt that the threatened abduction was no longer a possibility. It was actively happening right before his eyes. Ava's eyes widened with unmistakable terror as her body language communicated pure fear as clearly and effectively as any spoken language could have conveyed, and Ethan understood that every second of delay would only make the situation more dangerous for everyone involved. Time seemed to compress into a series of crucial seconds that would determine whether lives were saved or lost, and Ethan found himself forced to make a split-second decision that would either rescue innocent people or potentially endanger the one person he cared about most in the entire world. Rather than shouting loudly, or creating any kind of obvious alarm that might escalate the situation into immediate violence, Ethan made the calculated decision to rely entirely on the sophisticated silent communication system that he and Lily had developed and perfected over many years of daily necessity. His hands moved in rapid, precise American Sign Language gestures, providing his daughter with detailed instructions to approach the female server positioned near the kitchen entrance and relay a very specific message about the critical importance of securing the restaurant's back entrance from the inside, using the available deadbolt mechanism. Lily's expressive eyes immediately showed both complete understanding of the gravity of the situation and absolute trust in her father's judgment as she moved with carefully practiced casual purpose toward her designated target, maintaining the appearance of a normal teenage girl, while actually serving as a crucial component in a developing rescue operation. Ethan began to circulate methodically through the main dining room as if he were simply performing routine table maintenance and customer service duties, but every step of his path had been precisely calculated to achieve specific tactical objectives. He positioned the bright yellow wet floor warning sign at exactly the right angle near the bar area, creating what would appear to any observer as an accidental hazard, while actually establishing a carefully planned obstacle that could potentially trip up an attacker at the optimal moment. His smartphone vibrated quietly against his leg as he discreetly activated the silent emergency call feature, a sophisticated system that he had programmed and tested months earlier that would establish a direct connection to 911 emergency dispatch without requiring any verbal communication that might alert potential criminals to the fact that help was being summoned. The restaurant's walk-in refrigeration unit was equipped with an internal safety latch system designed to prevent accidental imprisonment, and Ethan had noticed during his earlier reconnaissance that the carbon dioxide fire suppression system was fully charged and ready for immediate deployment. The dense white smoke that such a system could produce would provide crucial visual cover if the developing situation escalated beyond the possibility of peaceful negotiation. Every single detail of the restaurant's layout, from the location of emergency exits to the position of kitchen equipment, had suddenly become a potential tool in a deadly serious game where the stakes were measured entirely in human lives rather than money or property. Across the dining room, Doyle had clearly noticed Lily's purposeful movement toward the kitchen area and had begun walking toward their table with unmistakable predatory intent written clearly across his hardened features. The cold expression on his face strongly suggested that the carefully planned operation was about to abandon any pretense of subtlety and give way to direct violence. And Ethan realized with growing urgency that his rapidly shrinking window for subtle intervention was about to close permanently. The scattered wine glasses from Nash's earlier theatrical performance suddenly became weapons of opportunity, as Ethan deliberately swept several of them toward Doyle's approaching figure, using a motion that appeared completely accidental to any casual observer. The sharp crash of breaking crystal created exactly the right amount of noise and visual distraction for Nash to lose his footing on the strategically positioned wet floor warning sign, his arms windmilling frantically through the air as he fought desperately to maintain his balance and avoid falling heavily onto the hard marble surface. Ethan quickly triggered the localized fire alarm system in the kitchen area, specifically choosing not to activate the building-wide emergency system that would automatically summon the fire department, but instead using the zone-specific alert that would drive other diners toward the main dining area and away from the kitchen, simultaneously providing both tactical cover for his own movements and additional confusion for the attackers who were clearly operating according to a carefully rehearsed plan. Through rapid and increasingly urgent sign language communications, he directed Lily to guide Ava toward the relative safety of the kitchen area, while he continued to create additional diversions and obstacles that would slow down and confuse their opponents. The electrical kill switch for the walk-in cooler was positioned exactly where local building codes required for safety compliance, and Ethan made careful mental note of its precise location as he orchestrated what he hoped would be controlled chaos that would either provide them with the opportunity to escape safely or, in the worst-case scenario, trap them in an even more dangerous situation than they currently faced. Marcel reappeared through the main entrance at precisely the wrong moment for the victims, his timing far too perfect and convenient to be purely coincidental. "Let me help you get to safety," he offered with theatrical concern, opening the kitchen door with an elaborate show of professional assistance and genuine care for customer welfare. But instead of leading the small group toward the clearly marked emergency exit that would take them directly to the street and safety, he gestured with apparent authority toward a narrow corridor that would actually take them deeper into the building's interior, away from help and toward areas where they would be completely isolated from potential witnesses or rescue. Ethan's growing suspicions suddenly crystallized into absolute certainty. The restaurant's security coordinator was not an ally who could be trusted, but rather another carefully positioned piece of the elaborately orchestrated trap that had been designed to capture Ava with maximum efficiency and minimum risk to the perpetrators. Inside the dimly lit professional kitchen area, Ethan methodically used every available reflective surface polished stainless steel appliances, gleaming pot lids, the glass doors of commercial ovens, even the chrome surfaces of industrial mixing equipment to track Rook's movements and position in the main dining room without exposing himself to direct observation. The criminal's lips continued to form words that Ethan managed to catch in fractured pieces through the challenging combination of distance, reflection, and changing angles. North Alley van, 5 minutes maximum. The carbon dioxide fire suppression system discharged with a loud and satisfying hiss, immediately filling the entire kitchen area with dense white fog that would buy them precious time by making it impossible for the attackers to see their exact positions or movements. Ethan quickly guided both Ava and Lily into the walk-in refrigeration unit, engaging the internal lighting system that would keep them clearly visible to each other, while simultaneously making them completely invisible to anyone attempting to search for them from outside the protective metal walls. In the relative safety and temporary security of the refrigerated space, surrounded by hanging sides of beef and shelves of fresh vegetables, Ethan made a confession that surprised even himself with its completeness and honesty. I used to train 911 emergency operators, he told Ava quietly, his voice remaining steady and controlled despite the extraordinary circumstances they found themselves facing. My job involved teaching emergency response protocols, advanced negotiation techniques for crisis situations, and sign language interpretation specifically for hearing-impaired callers who couldn't communicate through normal voice channels. I originally learned to read lips because my daughter needed me to understand her completely and communicate with her effectively, but the professional training gave me specialized skills that I never expected to use in a situation quite like this one. Ava's eyes widened dramatically as she began to understand the full implications of what Ethan was telling her about his background and capabilities. So you actually know what they want and how they're likely to proceed? Money, leverage over your business decisions, or simple revenge for some perceived wrong? Ethan replied with the confidence of someone who had studied criminal psychology extensively. But more importantly than understanding their motivations, I know how people like this think, how they plan their operations, and what their most likely responses will be to different types of resistance or negotiation. Near the entrance to the walk-in cooler, Ethan quickly inventoried their makeshift arsenal of improvised weapons and defensive tools. A broad-bladed chef's knife with a razor-sharp edge, a large stainless steel pot lid that could serve effectively as a protective shield, and several thick kitchen towels that could be soaked with cold water to provide protection against smoke inhalation or minor burns. The industrial kitchen had been designed primarily for efficiency and food safety, but tonight, its equipment and layout would have to serve the much more serious purpose of a battlefield where ordinary people fought for their lives against professional criminals. Marcel's voice carried clearly through the heavy steel door of the refrigeration unit, his tone artificially calm and reassuring in a way that immediately raised suspicions. "Open up right now. The police are here, and everything is under control." But Lily, who had positioned herself to watch his lips through the small observation window, signed rapidly and urgently to her father with a message that confirmed their worst fears. "He's lying." I can see him saying something completely different. The internal betrayal was now complete and undeniable, and Ethan realized with absolute clarity that their safety and survival depended entirely on their ability to outmaneuver and outwit people who had planned this entire operation with professional precision and extensive preparation. Using the kitchen's built-in intercom system, Ethan carefully projected his voice at exactly the right volume to ensure that Rook could hear him clearly without alerting other diners in the main restaurant area. "I have a child in here with me," he called out, his tone carefully modulated to suggest potential cooperation rather than defiance or resistance. "Please don't do anything that will traumatize her more than absolutely necessary. She's already been through enough difficult experiences in her young life." The psychological appeal to basic human decency and parental instincts was deliberately calculated to create hesitation and internal conflict in the attackers, buying precious time while Ethan continued to orchestrate his next series of tactical moves. He demanded what he characterized as a reasonable show of good faith. Nash would immediately drop any weapons he was carrying onto the dining room floor, where they would be clearly visible to everyone present, before any further negotiations or discussions could continue. Meanwhile, Lily followed her father's increasingly complex signed instructions with perfect accuracy, working alongside the frightened kitchen staff to systematically manipulate the restaurant's sophisticated lighting control system. By shutting off most of the ambient illumination throughout the dining area and focusing the remaining lights into intensely concentrated beams, they created a significant tactical advantage that would effectively blind anyone attempting to breach their defensive position. The industrial kitchen offered additional resources that could be converted into defensive tools. Large containers of hot cooking oil that could create painful barriers, bags of flour that would form thick clouds of concealing dust when thrown forcefully into the air, and containers of coarse salt that would make already wet floors treacherously slippery and dangerous for anyone attempting to move quickly across them. Every ingredient, every piece of equipment, and every structural feature of the professional kitchen had suddenly become a potential tool for survival in a desperate situation that none of them had ever imagined they would face. Outside the protective walls of the walk-in cooler, Rook's patience was clearly wearing dangerously thin as the carefully planned operation continued to take much longer than anticipated, creating far too many opportunities for law enforcement to arrive unexpectedly or for innocent witnesses to become problematic complications that would have to be dealt with permanently. When he grabbed a young bartender who had been trying to stay out of the way and pressed the cold metal barrel of a gun directly against the terrified man's head, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that the possibility of peaceful negotiation had completely failed and that direct action was now their only remaining option for survival. The heavy door of the walk-in cooler opened just a crack, creating a narrow gap that would serve multiple tactical purposes, and Ethan immediately released the carbon dioxide fire suppression system's remaining pressurized charge, while simultaneously using a polished metal surface to reflect the concentrated light beams directly into Rook's eyes with blinding intensity. The gunshot that followed was wild and completely panicked rather than aimed, with the bullet striking the thick stainless steel pot lid that Ethan held at precisely the correct angle to deflect the potentially lethal projectile harmlessly into the acoustic tiles of the ceiling above their heads. Flour and salt flew through the air in thick, choking clouds as Ethan systematically used every improvised weapon that the professional kitchen could provide. The soaked towels protected his hands from severe burns as he grabbed the handles of scalding pots and pans, using their weight and heat as weapons to sweep Nash's legs and send the criminal crashing heavily onto the wet and increasingly treacherous floor surface. Ava, following Ethan's rapid-fire instructions delivered through a combination of urgent whispers and hand signals, used the razor-sharp chef's knife to carefully cut through the restraints that were binding the innocent hostage, her hands remaining remarkably steady despite the chaos and violence that was erupting all around them. Lily activated her sophisticated emergency bracelet with a series of precise finger movements, automatically sending their exact GPS coordinates, along with a pre-programmed active shooter alert, directly to the emergency dispatch center. The electronic signal would bring real professional help from trained law enforcement officers, but only if they could somehow manage to survive long enough for the authorities to arrive and take control of the situation. Ethan relied on leverage and proper technique rather than brute physical strength to subdue Rook, applying a simple but effective arm control hold that would have made his old training instructors proud of his retention and application of their lessons. The gun skittered and spun across the wet floor, sliding completely out of reach, as Rook's arm was rendered temporarily useless by precise pressure applied to exactly the correct nerve cluster. But the most important and revealing discovery came when Ethan managed to catch Marcel making what he thought was a private phone call, his lips clearly forming words that painted the complete picture of betrayal and criminal conspiracy. "Blue van is ready and waiting." Absolutely no police presence at the rear entrance. The security coordinator was not merely complicit in the crime. He was actively coordinating the entire escape route and providing real-time intelligence to help the criminals avoid capture. The distant sound of sirens wailed through the city streets, but they were clearly approaching from the wrong direction to intercept the planned escape. Ethan realized that he had perhaps 30 seconds to expose the final layer of deception before the criminals disappeared forever into the night. The kitchen's security camera system operated on a completely independent power supply that remained functional even when other electrical systems failed, and Ethan made the calculated decision to force Marcel to repeat his coordination instructions while standing directly in front of the recording device. By compelling the traitorous security coordinator to speak aloud the same incriminating words that Ethan had observed through lip reading, he created undeniable video evidence of the conspiracy that would stand up in any court of law. The real police officers arrived through the main entrance, just as Rook, Nash, and Doyle were being subdued and secured with improvised restraints fashioned from kitchen equipment and tablecloths. Marcel's desperate attempt to blend in with the legitimate security personnel was immediately thwarted when the arriving officers discovered the recorded evidence and compared it directly to the 911 dispatch logs that had captured and preserved Ethan's earlier silent emergency call for help. Ava had sustained a minor but painful injury during the intense struggle, a deep cut on her forearm from a piece of broken glass, but Ethan's extensive first aid training allowed him to control the bleeding with professional competence and efficiency. The application of pressure bandages and proper elevation were simple techniques that had probably saved her from much more serious blood loss that could have become life-threatening. As Marcel was led away in handcuffs, his head hanging in shame and defeat, Ava turned to Ethan with an expression that combined genuine gratitude with something approaching awe and wonder. "How can I possibly thank you for what you've done? You saved my life and probably the lives of everyone else in this restaurant." Ethan's response was characteristically understated and focused on what mattered most to him. "Just make sure that Lily gets home safely tonight. That's the only thanks I need." But Ava's generous offer to provide safe transportation in her private armored car came with an unexpected and challenging complication. Aggressive news crews had completely surrounded the restaurant, their bright camera lights and pushy reporters creating a dangerous gauntlet that would be extremely difficult to navigate safely with a frightened and traumatized child. The local television news broadcast that aired later that evening led with a story that would resonate far beyond the immediate incident and inspire changes that none of them could have anticipated. Single father saves CEO, using sign language skills learned for deaf daughter. The reporter's concise summary captured the essential facts of what had occurred, but completely missed the deeper significance and lasting impact of the evening's extraordinary events. Exactly 1 week later, in a ceremony that drew media attention from across the region, Ava announced a comprehensive new corporate initiative designed to recruit and train hearing-impaired employees throughout all of her company's diverse operations. Lily was given the honor of cutting the ceremonial ribbon at a small but meaningful ceremony held at the restaurant, which had been completely repaired and reopened with significantly enhanced security measures and a renewed commitment to customer safety. When Ava offered Ethan a substantial cash reward that would have solved his financial problems for years to come, he politely but firmly declined the money and instead requested something that he considered far more meaningful and valuable: funding for comprehensive community sign language classes that would teach hearing people to communicate effectively with deaf and hard of hearing neighbors, coworkers, friends, and family members. The ambitious program would ensure that other children like Lily would grow up in a world where significantly more people could understand and communicate with them naturally, and that more parents like Ethan would have access to the skills necessary to protect and communicate with their children regardless of whatever physical or social challenges they might face. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony concluded and the camera crews began packing away their equipment for transport to their next assignment, Ava approached Ethan with one final question that had been bothering her throughout the week. "You never actually told me," she said quietly, ensuring their conversation would remain private. "What exactly did you do for a living before you became a restaurant server?" Ethan smiled warmly as he watched his daughter chatting animatedly with several new friends who were enthusiastically learning their first basic signs in American Sign Language. "I was someone who knew how to listen carefully to what people really needed," he replied thoughtfully. "And I suppose I still am exactly that same person." The simple answer contained far more truth and profound wisdom than most people would ever realize or fully understand. In a complex world that seemed increasingly filled with noise, distraction, and meaningless chatter, the ability to truly listen with eyes as well as ears, with patience, as well as technical skill, remained one of the most powerful and valuable tools that any person could possess or develop. Whether the situation involved saving lives during a crisis or simply making a genuine connection with a child who experienced and interpreted the world in a fundamentally different way, the art of listening remained both a precious gift and a serious responsibility that could change lives in ways that were both subtle and profound. As father and daughter walked home together through the quiet evening streets under softly glowing streetlights, their hands moved in the elegant silent language that had become their personal bridge between two very different worlds. The immediate emergency was finally over, but the deep connection and mutual understanding that had made their survival possible would last for the rest of their lives together.